So I'm going to talk briefly about, very briefly about ISWAN or ISWAN, depends on how you pronounce it, and what we do. A little bit about our helpline and the Seafarers Emergency Fund. Then I'll go on to talk about Seafarers in Communications, and I'll just present the findings of a recent survey in crew communications. So yeah, International Seafarers Welfare and Assistance Network, we came into being the 1st of April last year. It was a result of an amalgamation between the International Committee on Seafarers Welfare and the International Seafarers Assistance Network. So, and ICSW had been around for a number of years, since about 1976, and ISWAN had been around since about 1990 or so. And we're a membership organisation, and the key members are the ship owners, as represented by the International Chamber of Shipping, International Shipping Federation, the International Transport Workers Federation, who represent the seafarers, and the welfare organisations represented by ICMA. And you are all kind of indirectly members of ISWAN through your membership of NAMA, and through that, your membership of ICMA. And our main role really is to promote seafarers' welfare worldwide. One of the things, key roles that we play is to promote the Maritime Labour Convention that came into force a year ago, and particularly the welfare sections of the Maritime Labour Convention. I mean, arguably the whole convention is about seafarers' well-being, but our kind of specific role is around Section 4.4, access to shore-based welfare facilities, and the bits to do with health as well. And we also run, probably as you know, a series of projects. We've got the Seafarer Health Information Project, which has health information for seafarers. We do the Seafarer Centre Directory that a lot of you responded to. We're just in the process of updating at the moment, and we produced a research report on port levies and seafarers' welfare. And one of the things we do, really adds what. Without it, we wouldn't really have any impact at all. We work very closely with people like you, organisations like yourselves, the people on the front line, and we're very much there to support the work you do. Work in partnership with ICMO and as Jason said, in partnership with NAMA. So one of the main things we do, there's 13 of us staff in the organisation, and about eight of the staff work on the 24-hour helpline, Seafarer Help, and it's a free, confidential, 24-hour multilingual helpline. And what we do when we get a call from a seafarer, we largely, on the whole, refer it to other organisations such as the ITF, but also to ICMA members, particularly if a seafarer is going into that port, like New York or Halifax or somewhere like that, and then we contact the mission and say that the seafarer's phoned us up, has a particular issue, can you go and see that seafarer? I mean, a lot of the issues are to do with, if you like, labour issues around non-payment of wages, contract issues, repatriation, where seafarers have come to the end of the contract, they want to go back home, but the company or captain have said, no, you've got to stay on board another month or so. And as I said, you can see in the slide, in the last year we've had quite a big increase in the number of cases. Partly, well, a lot of that's to do with our marketing. We've invested a bit more in social media, particularly on Facebook, and Filipino seafarers tend to use Facebook quite a lot. So we've got quite a lot more calls through pushing the helpline on Facebook. And our staff speak the main seafarer languages. So we've got Filipino speakers, Mandarin, Hindi, Russian, etc. the other thing we do, and Jason mentioned this, we run the Seafarers Emergency Fund, and I'd really like to push this because we've got quite a large fund. It's funded by the TK Foundation and the International Transport Workers Federation Seafarers Trust, and to be honest, it's not used enough. I mean, there's quite a big pool of money there, and it can be used to for emergencies around sort of medical expenses, counselling, also in some circumstances, but not all, for helping repatriate seafarers. And we've just made a grant now to Father Lito in Mobile for a seafarer who's been seriously ill. So I urge you to look at the website and look at the criteria. The way it stands at the moment, the fund can't be used to give the funds directly to the seafarer. For instance, you know, you can't give the money for a plane ticket. You have to purchase the plane ticket on his or her behalf. But it's something we're looking at. But you know, I really urge you to take a look at the website and apply to the fund. And we're trying to make it much more streamlined, and we hopefully turn grants around in a couple of days. And then, as Jason said, when the typhoon hit in last year, November, you know, we estimated like 180,000 seafarers and their families were affected, and our funders and other organisations responded to our appeal for funds. So we raised about $100,000, and we've used it for, as Jason said, for communications. And there was some funding left over, so we've used that now for a couple of relief and reconstruction projects in the Philippines for seafarers communities. Okay, I'll come on to the survey about seafarers and communications. And as you, I mean, I don't need to tell you that communications to seafarers is probably their #1 welfare concern. And the picture is improving, as I'll show in the survey. It is getting better, but there's a lot more needs to be done. And you know, seafarers are no different from us. They want access, they want cheap or free access to communications. And it could be argued now that access to the internet is a human right. And I don't know if you know about Maslow's triangle, the hierarchy of needs. And this is the one adapted now. So at the bottom is our most fundamental need, which is Wi-Fi. But yes, as I say, I mean, it is part of our everyday lives, and it's becoming part of seafarers' everyday lives. And this is a quote I just pulled off the website before I came. This is a quote from a seafarer's wife, who I actually put up the findings on the report on our Facebook page and asked for comments from seafarers, and this is the one I got from a seafarer's wife. And I feel sure you know, you're pretty familiar with this, that you know, I mean, there are some companies, some really good companies, but there's some companies that don't provide much access. And there's some hobby seafarers who obviously have communication at sea. So this is the survey. It was done by a company called Future Nautics, and we kind of cooperated with them, and so did a number of other organisations, crew to the shipowners organisation, BIMCO Intermanager, and a shipping company in the Philippines. And it was quite a big survey, got 3,000 responses, which was a pretty big response. So it's a pretty good survey. But I think one of the things, when I spoke to another Roger who did the survey, about half the respondents were officers. So I think when I show you the findings, you have to bear that in mind. I think it skews some of the results. So I'll just go on to the main findings. It's available on our website if you want to pull down the report. It's about, I think, about 60 pages long, but it's worth reading. There's some really interesting information in there, and I think a lot of it is really relevant to the work you'll do. So the main findings are that 56% of the respondents say that they have some form of access to communications while they're at sea, and I suppose not surprisingly, the officers enjoy better access than the rest of the crew. 39% say that they have access only sometimes, and 6% never have access. And as I said, the actual situation is improving, but it's still not by any means near universal. And it's quite interesting, kind of, well, one of the things I pulled out was about 48% having access to text-only email. And there's a report the ITF did in 2007, and where they said only 16% had access. So things are moving in the right direction, but not really quick enough. Some of the other findings are that 76% of those with access have access to telephone calling. And quite an interesting fact was that 50% of those who do have access to the internet actually have it for free. And I think one of the reasons for that the report author thought was because the whole complexity of charging a seafarer, how do you charge them? Is it by the hour, or, and keeping track of that is probably more expensive than actually giving them free access. But the report also found that there's very low access to actually free phone calls at sea. And I think this part about the cost to seafarers, I think is really interesting. The MLC, Maritime Labour Convention, talks about reasonable access at reasonable cost. Now what is reasonable? And you also have to remember that when the MLC was drawn up, it was adopted in 2006. I mean, it actually came into force last year. So when it was being drawn up, so it actually started to be drawn up 10 years ago. And if you think 10 years back, what our access to communications were like. I mean, we probably still had those dial-up modems. Do you remember those? And Twitter, Facebook weren't around. So the world's moved on dramatically in the last 10 years. So I think if the MLC was being drawn up today, I think this bit of the convention would be a lot stronger. Again, almost giving seafarers a right to communications. And the whole thing about cost, again, I think it's really. I mean, I don't know if you probably do know this about the amount of phone cards you sell, but the actual amount seafarers spend on communications is well, it's pretty phenomenal, really. When you can see that, the minimum wage of a seafarer now, Filipino, Indian seafarer is about $585 a month. Now, a lot of seafarers get a lot more than that if they're in a collective bargaining agreement, and with overtime they get nearly $1,500. But I'm not sure. I mean, I think Karen from the union's here, but I mean, I don't know if you know the percentage of seafarers in collective bargaining agreements. I think it's about 200,000 seafarers. So it's only about 20% of seafarers are in these, actually have this sort of salary. So I mean, if you can imagine. If you're on a minimum wage, almost 50% of your salary is spent on communications. I mean, I think the average wage in the States is $50,000. So you can imagine spending $25,000 a year on communications. So it puts into some perspective. But the other really interesting thing, and I think what the report author did was then to say, well, seafarers are spending $273 per month. So you multiply that by 12, and then multiply that by 1.25 million. So he said that he says that the global spend per year is $2.6 billion that seafarers spend on communication. I think that's probably a bit high, but I mean, even if it was half that, it's a phenomenal amount of money. So I think it's a really interesting part of the report. And this is just a breakdown. You probably can't see it very well of the spend of seafarers ashore at sea. So the dark bit is when they're at sea, and the green bit is when they're ashore. So moving from your left to right, the biggest one's voice calling. The next one's SMS. The third one is email. The fourth one along, which is the lowest, is instant messaging. The next one is video chat and VoIP. And the last one is internet access. So it's just a kind of graph showing the breakdown. And as I said before, because of the number of officers that took part, it does skew the survey a bit. Okay. The other part of the report, well, he put a question in about port calls in the survey, and he found that well, about 3/4 of the respondents never or rarely went ashore during port visits. And I don't know if that is your experience, but we all know it's quite hard now for seafarers to get ashore for turnaround times, ISPS, etc. But there's quite a high percentage of seafarers not being able to, or not being able to go ashore, very rarely ashore. 18% they were able to go ashore in most port calls, and 6% said they were able to go ashore in every port. And he actually put another question in about welfare facilities, and he said that he found that 23% of crew use welfare facilities, and he said that this was due to, as you know, the limited time in port, and also the officer bias of the group, because seafarers, as you know, are busy when they're in port, but the officers have a lot of the paperwork to do and inspections, etc. He didn't have a question about ship visiting. I think he's going to try and do the survey again, so we'll try and get him to put a question about ship visiting. So I think that's quite an interesting part of the report for welfare organisations. And I don't know if this actually would concur with what you see in your reports. There was another study done. It's quite a big study, which was funded by the European Union. It's called the NOMI project, and this report again looked at the lack of access to communications for seafarers, and basically what it found was that the lack of access to communications was one of the major factors in getting seafarers then to get a job ashore, because it interfered with family life. And they also found that seafarers, if they had good access to communications, then it would influence their choice of company. And it concludes that the poor internet access is a major factor in determining whether seafarers remain at sea. So, in summing up, I thought I'd just look at what the implications are for the findings for seafarer welfare organisations. And because there's obvious ones, the threats that if seafarers have a lot more access at sea, then they won't necessarily go to the centres to use the internet, to get phone cards, etc. So then there's a knock-on income streams to centres. And also, it could be said that port-wide Wi-Fi, port-wide free Wi-Fi, like they have in Montreal and Antwerp, and some other ports as well, that is a threat to seafarer centres. But that's what seafarers want, and so I think we have to look at how we deal with that. There are also opportunities, and I put this down as an opportunity. And one of the things in the report that he asked, I should really put it up, about whether increased access at sea to the internet meant more social isolation on board, and there's quite a high finding. So I think there's a role there to say to seafarers, if there's a lot more internet and Wi-Fi at sea, and with seafarers going back to their cabin after they come off duty, not socialising because they want to get on to the internet, it could be then, how you actually say to seafarers, well, come off the ship, come to the centre, come meet people, come talk. There's also opportunities around online services. What online service can welfare organisations provide when seafarers have more access? And it could be that there's online counselling. Obviously face-to-face counselling is much more preferable, but if they're at sea in the middle of the ocean and have an issue and have good access, then they can talk to someone professional and ask for advice and get them to help them to deal with the particular issue they've got. This whole issue around online shopping, and we talked to some people about the increased access, the increased use of credit cards by seafarers. I was talking to Brightwell Payments yesterday, and they say now 60,000 seafarers use their credit card, and that number's going to grow. So if seafarers have their credit card, have access to Amazon or Best Buy at sea, there's an opportunity there, like they do in Boston, to receive the packages for the seafarers and charge them $1 or $2 to receive the packages. I think there's if people aren't going to the seafarer centres to use the internet, then it's about getting on that ship and increasing ship visiting. And also, and lastly, but by no means least, is looking at how the welfare organisations, how we collectively can get a bit more share of that 2.6 billion. Even if it was half that, even if it was only 1.3 billion, and we got, I think, 1%. On my maths is trying to take away. I mean, that's about $13 million. Is that right? Something around 1%. So even we got 0.5%, I think we'd be happy with that. So I think it puts things into perspective. So and just to say, we've just been doing the Seafarer Centre directory, and we can't trace about 40 or 50 seafarer centres since we did the last one. So about around the world, about 40 to 50 centres have closed in the last 2 years. So I don't know what it's like in North America, but seafarer centres around the world are having problems, and I think centres need to look for new income streams and a imaginative way of funding. Okay, just to end, just to say that I've got quite a lot of material on my stand, on the stand outside. So if you want to, I've got the report for Seafarer Help. I've got the Seafarer Health information. I'd like to thank, is it Sharon from Corpus Christi for minding the boxes that we sent down from the CMA. So thank you for that. So anyway, I'm happy to take questions at the end on the panel. So thank you very much.